Hello, so I got asked to do a little video about orienting your joints and why this is important. And I want you to know before we start the difference between world and local. So when you're orienting your joints, you want to do it on the local axis because that means like on your object, where do you want it to rotate? World axis is the entire file. So you may have multiple things facing different directions, dealing with different gravities. So we want local. You also want to make sure that you're consistent. Some people will say, X has to be up. Some will say Y has to be up. Some will say Z has to be up. Depends on the company you're working for, the project you're working for. So just make sure that for you, it makes sense and is consistent. The main thing that the main reason why orienting your joints is important is so that one, they move as they should. If we curl all of our fingers in, we want them to actually go in towards our palm. You don't want them to go to the side or awkwardly bend to the wrong angle. And the other reason is because of our graph editor. So when you're animating, and as you get a little bit more into animation, you'll be dealing with the graph editor. And what that allows you to do is kind of look at the ease in, ease out timing of each object and the orientation of each object. Okay, so one of your classmates has given me this model, this rig. I've removed the IK from this arm and the controller just so we could see the basics. If you want to see the kind of angles of the axis, you can go to Display and then Transform, Display, and then Local Rotation Axis. So you can see currently I have Z going down, X and Y. You could do this throughout your rig if you want. Now, the main thing, if we look and we've got our rotate here, this is looking pretty smooth. This is rotating the way that we want. I want to show you though the options of how we can change it. So we can go to skeleton and then orient joint. Now, you can orient the joints to the world, which I wouldn't recommend because that's setting it for your entire scene to have everything rotate the same way, and that's not how you want it to do. Primary axis is which way do you want to point down. Secondary, which one do you want to point up? And then you can say which rotation. Do we want it to be in the positive or in the negative? So you can really go through all this to make sure all of your joints down the chain are actually facing the same way because you'll want it to point down the chain. Now there's been some questioning about freeze transform. Now, this is used for two different things. Sometimes if I've already bound this to a mesh, it won't allow me to really orient my joints because there's already going to be a rotate to the mesh. So let's say, for example, I made a cylinder. I wouldn't use this necessarily for the arm, but if you get this to be the arm, you can see I already have rotate set. So if I've bound this and I go to orient these joints, it's going to have a problem because it doesn't recognize my mesh because it already has a rotate value. Okay, so we need to make sure we right mouse click so I just clicked and dragged to get all of my rotate. Right mouse click, and then we're going to freeze. I just do all. And what that does is zero out your transforms and your rotates so that now this can actually rotate and, change the axis because it's clean, it's fresh. It doesn't know that this was made at the 0, 0, 0 point and moved. It's here, so now it can orient that the correct way without having to move it around. Same thing, if you've created a controller for your rig, a lot of times we'll freeze transforms for the controller, same way, just freeze all, brings them all to 0, scale to 1. Now you can move this freely and set it back. So the default positioning of your model is 0, 0, 0. So if I'm animating along, blah, 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 I've got this up here, I've set keys, and I want it to go back to its original state, I can easily just look here, hit 0, and it's back to where it needs to be. Okay, so a lot of times we're going to use that orient joint to make sure that it's rotating the correct way. Some of you might find, when you go to rotate something, it's not rotating the way you really want it to. Looks like this one's already moving, in the appropriate direction, but that's how we can change this. You can also actually rotate the joint to get it to be exactly how you want it to rotate. So if for some reason I wanted it to go from here, and then I can freeze my transforms, and now that's set to be starting from that direction. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, and let me know if you have any other questions.